Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video in which our OP, being a conductor on the train, did a good deed. A little in his own way. Want to avoid the fare? Sure, why not? So I work as a train conductor for Company and Country. My job includes making sure there are no disturbances on the train, as well as keeping a loose eye on everyone having tickets. I'm usually pretty lenient on this if you have a good reason or a funny enough excuse, because hey, sometimes life kicks you in the head and you really have to be somewhere. So to the scene. I'm doing ticket rounds on a late evening train. Out of the corner of my eye, I see two teenagers, maybe 15 or 16, switch seats. That's okay, I think no more of that. Until a few minutes later when I come to their compartment in order to check their tickets and hear their particular excuse. There are 6 teenagers in total. Every single one of them is pretending to be asleep. But this is the first time they've tried it after making eye contact. So I just kind of chuckle and go, "Nice try," loud enough for the rest of the compartment to hear. They feign ignorance and say they were trying to catch a bit of sleep. I also notice they're carrying alcohol with them. They're off to a bad start, so I ask for the tickets. This is when I hear a myriad of excuses. Friend's mom has them. Nobody has a working phone on them. When we get the battery charged, friend's mom doesn't care and hangs up. They actually went the wrong way first. You get the point by now. So they finally drop the act and start pleading for a free ride. They even tried to bribe me with 10 euros, to which I replied, "Next time you try to bribe someone, here's a little heads up. Don't do it in front of a dozen witnesses." The other passengers were having a blast so far. As a last straw, they bring up the fact that they are, in fact, underage, and I'm technically in charge of keeping them safe. Here's the thing. I have to be really careful now because the law being what it is, I could be held accountable if I drop them off somewhere without supervision and something happens to them. I finally relent to them to go as far as the next station where they can still buy tickets with that bit of cash they had and continue to do my job. Now, of course, as I have to keep them safe, I naturally am worried about underage drinking on their part as well. That stuff rots their brains and hinders development of these beautiful young children, so I arrange for security and police to meet them at the same station. Naturally, once they jump off the train and one of them even says, "Man, we really managed to bullcrap that one," I direct the impressive amount of "nothing better to do right now" security and police officers to the teenagers. I've never seen anyone get as pure of a "oh crap" impression as those kids right then. Their drinks get confiscated and destroyed, and each of them gets shipped home to have a meeting with their guardians, police, and possibly even CPS if this is a recurring problem. Fines could be slapped as well. Moral of the story? Be honest. And under no circumstances tell me to keep you safe. Because I'll keep you safe. And our second story. How Harry Joe quit his job. Harry Joe was a hard man. He got to be because life was hard on him. The closest person to him used to say he was evil, but I'm not sure many people in his circumstances would turn out good. My parents are farmers only on a very liberal interpretation. Our home and their jobs are in the city, and they keep an employee to tend the cows at the farm. They only work there on weekends. One of such employees was Harry Joe, the first, I believe. He used to work at a neighboring farm under a very nasty farmer, the kind of people Harry Joe was used to dealing with his entire life. Before that, I've heard from that farmer himself. He was picked from the roads. Harry Joe was a hobo who covered by foot the hundreds of kilometers between the cities of our sparsely populated country. He had a sharp mind when sober and could read and write enough for his needs. He looked well into his 50s, had no teeth in sight, but would look younger when my mother got him a denture. He didn't keep in touch with his family, but knew where to find some of his estranged relatives from his extremely poor and abuse-ridden childhood. He was a very serious man. I only ever saw him smiling when he was harming someone. See, he had this girlfriend from the city whose nickname translates roughly to Madam Lil Black, and she was married to some older guy. She would often spend leisure time at Harry Joe's house, at my parents' farm, sometimes accompanied by her husband too. The old guy seemed somewhat powerless about what the friendship between his wife and Harry Joe, and tolerating it was better than being alone. One of the few times I ever saw Harry Joe smiling was when he mocked the old guy for his pathetic situation. The other was when he hit Madam Lil Black just for the sake of it. Compared to people Harry Joe was used to dealing with, my parents were wimps. And not long after he got the job, he started to get very comfortable. A word about my father, which is the authority figure in a male chauvinist world, even though it was my mother who called the shots about the farm, is that he always had many underlings throughout his professional life, but he never raises his voice and is always polite. He's the finest example of a gentleman. Harry Joe took the lack of rudeness for naivete. He seemed to think my parents believed his ever-increasing lies, ignored his habit of working drunk, his mistreatment of the animals, and his overall disregard for work instructions. Turns out Madame Lilblack had a very loose tongue. And there isn't much she wouldn't tell. For instance, when a puppy we brought to the farm disappeared, he'd say it ran off, but she'd let us know Harry Joe gave the puppy to another woman he was seeing from a neighboring farm. That woman was from a nationwide organized group of settlers who claims abandoned farms, often at the margin of the law. Among poor families in that settlement, there were all kinds of villains. People with Harry Joe would befriend and drink together. Harry Joe would often appoint his friends from the settlement for temp hires to some jobs at the farm that required more than one man, and for the first few times, my parents would oblige. One day, Harry Joe was drunk operating farm machinery and managed to have his thumb almost chopped off. It was held together only by a small patch of skin. My father fetched him from the farm and dropped us at the hospital, where I kept his company until he was treated. His thumb was reattached, but I believe it never got its full movement back. This accident happened at a time when every insubordination and lie had finally built up to a point where my mother decided to fire him. It left my parents in a tight spot. He was drunk when he operated the machine, which would be cause for immediate termination if it could be proved. Without proof and other witnesses, it was a labor accident. Parents would be happy to fire him without cause just to get rid of him, but what would it look like in court to fire a guy still injured from a labor accident? Well, they decided they'd have to wait for his complete recovery before it was safe to fire him. That's when opportunity presented itself. They needed to perform some heavy work at the farm. Harry Joe was working, but not totally healed yet. Some temporary hires would be needed, and Harry Joe promptly suggested his settlement friends. Mother said on the phone, no, not them. Now, there are two more things you should know about Harry Joe. He was a very proud man, and he believed my parents thought he was irreplaceable. They were city wimps who would be lost without him after all. Harry Joe replied, it's either them or I quit. Mother, are you sure? Well, we'll drop by today so you can sign your resignation letter. That night after work, my parents drove to the farm and handed the letter for him to sign. It had to be quick before he changed his mind. Before signing, Harry Joe made a few attempts to save his job, complained about the work, the demands, etc., all while Mother, on the inside, was praying for him to sign the letter and not back out. He was hoping to hear, have it your way then, but all she did was hear it, swallow the rightful answers to the unjust complaints, and reply, sure. Pride decided the outcome that day. If Mother answered the provocation and called out his bullcrap, would he back out from quitting? I can't really imagine it as a way out from that situation for such a proud man. I know he didn't swallow his pride, and after all, what he said hit the walls that were my parents that day. There was nothing left for his pride but to sign the papers he requested. He left on his own will, went to work at a farm in a town close by, and lived in a much worse house. So said Madame Lilblack. Entitled mother trespassing to my house. Well, my neighborhood's full of entitled parents that'll go nuts because of stupid stuff. Someone threatened to go to court because of a pink door. And this gives me a lot of material for stories. The cast, me is me, my dad is MD, entitled mother is EM, entitled kid is EK. Well, let's go to the story. I have a big back garden that's flat and will bring the neighborhood kids to my house before we moved in. And after that, we have to explain to a lot of Karens why their precious angels can't play in our yard, and since we also started growing some vegetables and fruits, strawberries, some of the kids will come to steal them. So now let's actually start with this. I woke up late. My parents had taken my sister to a Girl Scout activity, and I started hearing noises coming from our deck. When I moved the curtain expecting to see a bird or a squirrel, I see a woman and her son. Me. Who are you, and what are you doing here? EM. That's not for you to know. You're probably just a squatter living here, so F off and leave us alone. EK. Yeah, F off. Who do you think you are, B? I live here with my parents and you're trespassing, and if you don't effing leave, I'm calling the cops. I see my dad's car and hear the garage door opening. EM hears it, but makes a run for it and trips with the water hose. I notice she's carrying a basket with strawberries, tomatoes, and some of the herbs we have. You dirty thieves, get the hell out of here. My dad opens the door and sees the woman and asks me in Spanish, "Who's that?" She's a thief. I found her here with her son picking up our crop. You have 5 effing seconds to go before I call the cops. EM gets up, grabs EK by the arm, and flees. My dad takes a picture and sends it to the HOA. Some days later, we found out she was a member of the HOA and lost her position. I'm shocked that the EK is learning from his EM. No child should have the attitude of someone like that. Housemate terminated the lease without asking, so I moved out immediately with the fridge. This happened some years ago. I was reminded of it by reading stories on here. I'd just moved to Sydney and had been living in a share house for a few months that I'd found through a flat share website. We got on okay. We'd go out to parties together, etc. Most of the stuff in the house was theirs. I only brought my fridge, and they'd just thrown theirs out, considering it replaced. I'm about to get the week's groceries and ask my housemate if she wants anything. No, she's good. I get lots of food to cook for the week and come home to find her standing awkwardly with her boyfriend. She had weird news. They decided to move out together. How exciting. Okay, so I guess that means I take over the lease? Nope. They considered themselves the last in a long line of friends who'd leased the house, and being the last to go, thought it fitting to terminate the lease. They'd notified the landlord prior to speaking to any of us. They figured I could stay with my sister. Jack was only in the country another month, and Sarah was hardly here anyway. Okay, so I didn't have a leg to stand on. Legally, I wasn't signed on the lease, so I had 3 weeks to vacate. House hunting is like a part-time job, and I already had a full-time job. No time to cook all that food, I guess. Would have been good to know before the shop. I got lucky and found a house just down the road in the same day. Nice people, good spot, and close enough that I could move my things in by hand immediately if I like. I slept in my new house that night, but I always like to think you haven't really moved in until your fridge is in. And don't worry, I had that sorted out too. The others in the house found new places quickly too, leaving the happy couple home alone. I came back to pick up a couple of loose ends 3 weeks later and got to see their fridge work around in all its slumly glory. An esky full of food floating in melted ice. The revenge was petty and small, proportionate to their actions. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.